Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Julia Witta
Hi.
with Publishers Speak. That's okay. And we have with us this morning Jennifer Handcock, an author, and she's going to tell us about her book. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hi. Good morning. How are you?
Good.
All right. Let's see. Well, I'm a humanist, and I've got a couple of books out on humanism. The main one is called The Humanist Approach to Happiness, Practical Wisdom. And the emphasis on it is on practical wisdom. I wrote it originally for teens and young adults to kind of put ethics in a context. I think a lot of times when we talk to young people about ethics, we don't really make the connection to everyday decision making. Like, who do you want to date is an ethical consideration. Who do you want to have sex with or don't want to have sex with?
Right.
This is a matter of ethics, right? And I think we kind of divorce ethics and make it about the really big things. And actually ethics, the power of ethics is in the little things, the everyday decisions you make about what sort of person you want to be, who do you want to have as friends. And so my book kind of takes ethics and say, look, you're responsible for the consequences of your actions. Here's how this kind of plays out, and here's why you might want to make better decisions before you act so that you can maximize the good consequences and minimize the bad. All right.
And
then I say,
teenagers.
here's how it looks like. Yeah, with teenagers. And here's how it looks like when you're talking about peer pressure. Here's what it looks like when you're considering whether to do drugs or to drink, or, here's how it applies to your finances, dating and relationships. Things like that. Who do you want to have sex with? Do you not want to have sex with them? Because, all of these situations are situations that could be good for us or could be bad for us. And it's good for us to take a little bit of time before we act to decide whether this particular situation is going to be net good or net bad for us. And then take our actions accordingly. Because over the course of your life, what I tell people in my classes is, and I have a cat on my lap, so if I start petting, that's what's going to happen. But what I tell people in my class is, look, driving drunk is not going to guarantee you're going to get in an accident. Driving sober is not going to guarantee you're not going to get in an accident. All it does is it changes the odds of something good or bad happening to you. Mm-hmm. And over the course of your life, changing these odds has a tremendous impact on the quality of your life. So if you want to live a happy, productive life, which, who doesn't, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
Take some time to think about your choices before you act. And so that's what my book is about. It's kind of for parents to use with their kids to have these discussions about, what do you want to do if people offer you drugs? It's not that all drugs are bad. Certainly some drugs are good. It all depends on the context. Right. Not all relationships are bad. Some of them are really good. It all depends on the context. So how do you make those decisions for yourself? And that's the conversation I want people to be having with their kids.
Yeah, my grandson won't even take cold medicine or anything, allergy medicine, because he's so down on drugs, and I appreciate that, but he should take allergy medicine,
Well, it all depends on the cost-benefit, right? I mean, everything in your life has a cost-benefit that you have, analysis that you have to do on it. And that, to make those decisions well, you have to know how to think critically. You have to know how to evaluate the claims being made to you to find out what's true and what's not. Because some of the solutions are snake oil. And some of them can really, really help you and not cause any negative side effects. But it all depends on who you believe. And if you believe things that aren't true, it could cost you your life. I mean, Steve Jobs tried to treat cancer with a diet. And I'm not saying a diet's not going to help, right? Diet, certainly part of the mix. But if that's all you do, you end up like Steve Jobs and you end up dying.
Yeah. Right.
So how do you make good decisions? And I have a 6-week course where I lay this out and I say, okay, here's critical thinking skills. Here's the skills you need to know. When skeptics like me, because humanists we're skeptics, but we're not knee-jerk skeptics. What we're doing is we're saying we have the ability, we're empowered, we have a brain, we have the ability to discern what is true and what is not true, but we have to be skeptical of the claims being made to us and then do the research to find out who is telling the most truth and who's not. This is what happened with the vaccine scare, right? People were skeptical of the vaccines, but then they didn't go and actually look at the evidence. They just were skeptical, right? Being skeptic is the first step. Then you have to evaluate the evidence, right? And if you can't evaluate the evidence to tell who's telling the truth or not, you're flying blind. And so this is why humanists are really big on critical thinking skills, logic, reason, science, why we spend as a community almost all our time talking about these things. It's not because we're jerks or don't like astrology. I mean, I read my astrology sign every day, but I don't plan my life according to it.
Right.
I treat it as entertainment because, astrology is based on the stars all being in the places that they're not, if you want to know the truth. So, but we do this because we want to make good decisions that are actually going to work for us. We have a problem. We want to solve it. We want the solutions that's going to do the best job of helping us solve that problem and not just take a stab at the wind with the first person who claims they can help us.
And what is your class online, or where do you teach this class?
Yeah, I was teaching it live at a college in Florida, but I've recorded it, and it's now like a 6-hour class. It's broken up into 6 1-hour lessons, and one week is on ethics and the role ethics plays. The next week is on critical thinking. Then we talk about compassion, responsibility, and coping. And the people who have taken the class say it's really, really profound. And I'm not teaching things you don't already know. This is but what I do is I put it in a context so you can actually do it.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense? It's like so often we're told things like don't drink and drive. It's actually really good advice. But if someone doesn't give you the details on why and more importantly, how to drink responsibly, you can't drink responsibly. So you need the details. That's what my class kind of does, is it breaks it down and says, okay, here's the elements that you need. Here's how they work and why they work. And here's some real life situations so you can see how they work and how you might implement them. And then, we go forward and the whole class builds upon it. So when you finish the unit on ethics, you find yourself asking questions about critical thinking. Because our ethical thinking is entirely dependent on what we know to be true, whether or not what we think is true is actually true, right? Our entire ethical considerations are based on what is true and what is not true. So then we have to talk about critical thinking and reasoning and logic and how we do that. But then you start thinking, that's so dry, I need some compassion. So then we talk about compassion for an hour. And it's a really good class, and I'm teaching it online right now for the Center for Inquiry, but it's available for downloads or for DVDs or data discs if you want at my website, jen-handcock.com. So I've got a book, and I've got the class that goes with the book, which is in more detail, obviously, because it's 6 hours long.
Yeah, right. And how big is the book?
The book's only about 122 pages. I'm one of those short but sweet sort of girls when it comes to writing.
Okay.
But I'm told by people who've read it, it's a really good book. I mean, every once in a while, people have taken.
So sorry.
That's okay. Every once in a while, someone takes issue with something I'm saying, but I kind of view that as mission accomplished because the point of the book, I'm really opinionated. All right, who isn't, right? But the point of the book wasn't for me to tell you my way is the right way. The point of the book was for me to show you how I think through common problems so that you can think through yourself, is this who I want to be? Maybe I might want to do it a little bit differently. My values are a little bit different than hers, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently. So even if you disagree with the content of the book, which people rarely do, because it's all common sense stuff, but even if you disagree with it, that's mission accomplished because the point was to make you think explicitly about what it is you value and how you might put your values into action in your daily life, in your daily decision making. So if you accomplish that, even if you don't agree with me, the mission of the book is accomplished. It's designed to be discussed.
Great. Okay, well and so that's at jen-hancock.com.
Yeah, it's called The Humanist Approach to Happiness, Practical Wisdom. That's the book. It's going to be released in Swahili at the end of May. I've got a pastor in Kenya who started preaching my book to his congregations there as a way to teach rational ethics to the young people in his congregation, because there's an AIDS epidemic in Africa right now. And he needed a way to explain to his young people why promiscuous sex without protection, not the best of ideas during an AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
And religious ethics aren't adequate to talk about that. You need rational. There's nothing wrong. I don't have a problem with religious ethics, but there are things you need rational ethics to talk about. And that's what humanism provides. It provides the rationale for the rational ethics, the here and now consequences to your behavior.
Yeah, because if the kids have already set aside the religious ethics and they're going to have sex, they should at least know what they need to do to stay alive.
Exactly.
What about, let's talk a little bit more about the compassion chapter. What's in that?
Compassion kind of runs throughout the whole book, because humanism rests on three pillars: reason and compassion put into action. So our goal as humanists is to live ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. In other words, live your life to the fullest, love other people, and leave the world a better place. Now, the first chapter that I have that talks about compassion is the ethics chapter. It's called the True Holy Trinity. These are the character traits that really matter. You need to be ethical, compassionate, and responsible. All right, so that helps you be a good person, but it also helps you judge other people as to whether you can trust them or not. If they're ethical, compassionate, and responsible, you can probably trust them. If they're missing one of those, you probably can't. If they're missing all three, they're really dangerous. So, this is the neat thing about humanism is we don't judge people based on arbitrary things. We don't judge them on skin color or gender or age or part of the world they come from or religion. We judge people on how they actually act, and they either act in a responsible, compassionate, ethical way, or they don't. All right, and you need to know this for yourself, because if you're just taking everybody and trusting everybody, there's people you can't trust in the world. I mean, it would be nice if you could trust everybody, but in reality, that's not the way it works. All right, so we talk about compassion in there as it relates to what I call the True Holy Trinity of character traits that really matter. But I also talk about it in two other chapters. One of them is called The World Doesn't Revolve Around You. All right, and it has to do with the fact that we get caught up in our own heads. All right, we're kind of isolated in our brains. And we forget so often that when we're talking to other people, that they're real people. They're not cardboard cutout walk-ons in the movie that is our life that stars us. All right, they have their own movie that they're starring in that you have nothing to do with. And I think a lot of times people take things personally that happen to them, like someone cuts them off, all right, on the freeway, or someone is rude to them at a store, right? And we take it personally, and we have to not take it personally because it's not about you. People's behavior 99% of the time is about them and what they're dealing with. And you don't know what they're dealing with because you don't know them. Even if you're living with them, right? Even if they're your family, you don't really know what's going on with them unless they tell you. And even then, you're just getting their perception of what's happening to them. But it's not ever totally clear. So when you reach out to people in compassion, it's not just lip service. I'm going to be compassionate with people. It really has a tangible impact on how you relate to other people and how you feel about those relationships. Because it's not about you and what they can do for you, although that's important and you get benefit from this. But it's about them. When people you're interacting with them, it is about them. That's the only way they have to view the interaction is through their own lens. And when you understand that, it makes interpersonal relationships so much easier. Just way easier. Because it's not about you.
Now, what were those three things again? Ethical, compassionate,
responsible. That's the true Holy Trinity. What I call the true Holy Trinity. The character traits that really matter. And I think a lot of times when people talk about religion, they say, oh, this person's religious. And they're using that as shorthand to say this person's ethical, compassionate, or responsible. And I think we need to stop doing that because it's really clear. No, as my daddy always says, no group corners the market in stupidity, right? There's stupid people in every group. All right. So you can't make an assumption based on an affiliation whether someone's a good person or not. You have to judge them on how they actually act.
Now, two of these seem easier to observe and judge, the compassionate and responsible. But how do you define ethical behavior if you're looking at someone and saying, can I trust this person?
Right. And humanists use rational ethics. So our ethics are based on compassion, on human compassion. And we judge things as good or bad based on how they impact yourself and other people. All right. Humanist ethics are compassionate and situational and rational. So the consequences we're concerned about are the consequences here and now. If you are also concerned with the consequences in your afterlife, that is fine. Not a problem, but that's not where the humanist concern is. You should probably be concerned about both, right?
Right.
But the humanist philosophy is focused on the consequences here and now. And we judge those consequences as good or bad based on compassion. And we view people who subordinate compassion to other values, say money or some higher good, as being kind of evil. All right, because as soon as someone abandons compassion for some other value, they're going to cause harm in pursuit of that other value. And that's not to say some of these other values aren't good. It's just what do you hold above all the other values? And for a humanist, it's compassion, and we do not apologize for that. All right, because we can see the impact that non-compassionate ethics have on the world. And that's all we need to know about it. The third thing about humanism, besides the fact that it's rational and compassionate, is that it's situational. All right. So, sex, is it good or bad? Well, it depends on the situation.
Yes.
All right. There is no rule that you can ever make up about ethics that is absolute. And the example I give, it was actually an example from my son. When he was 4, I came into the living room to find him with a mouthful of pennies. And I panicked, right? Yeah, exactly. I panicked. So we got the pennies out of his mouth, and we had a conversation of, did they taste good? No, they didn't. New rule. If it's not food, it doesn't belong in your mouth. All right? Now, this is a very easy to understand rule. All right, there shouldn't be any exceptions to it. If it's not food, it doesn't belong in your mouth.
It wasn't for your toothbrush.
Well, exactly. That's the example my sister came up with. Toothbrushes and toothpaste aren't food, but they do belong in your mouth. It doesn't matter how good the rule is and how much everybody's going to agree with it. There are always exceptions to it. And if you are not prepared, if your ethical system is absolute and does not prepare you or allow you to think through these exceptions to figure out what is right and what is wrong with the exceptions, then your ethical system, from a humanist perspective, fails you. Because what happens, if you're called upon, like the president was in the last year, to kill one person to save the lives of thousands, right? And we all have different opinions on whether the killing of Osama bin Laden was ethical or not, but that's kind of the point. It wasn't a cut and dried situation. Right? It was hard to think through because it pitted don't kill against don't kill. All right. And this is why it was hard. That was why it was such a hard situation. No one enjoyed thinking about that. No one. I don't know anybody who thought this is cut and dry. It's not cut and dry. And if your ethics do not prepare you to think through these dilemmas, but choosing between the greater of two goods or the lesser of two evils. If your ethics are not adequate to that, then you don't really have a very good ethics system from a humanist standpoint. So we go in understanding our ethics are situational. And then that's why we learn critical thinking skills and logic so that, we can do our ethical reasoning well. Because if you don't know how to think critically, you don't reason well.
Okay.
That's the humanist perspective. That's the humanist perspective on ethics and reasoning.
Wonderful. I thought that was fascinating.
So that's what I teach in my classes and in the book.
Okay. And we're about out of time, so tell us once again where they can get your book and sign up for your classes.
Sure. I'm on the web at jen-handcock.com. And I've got a couple of books, and I've got the 6-week course coming out that's already out. I've also got a book on bullying that's coming out in a few weeks. I just have to finish the final things on it, but it's called The Bully Vaccine. I've already got LGBT groups lining up to buy it. It's apparently, you write things and you don't know if they're good. It's apparently a good book.
Okay. Well, great. And I'm hopefully you'll be on the show the night that it's aired so that you can answer questions in the chat room.
I'd love to. Sounds like
for
fun.
all our viewers who are listening to this, just check the chat room for Jennifer Handcock and ask her whatever you'd like about Thank you.
Thank you so much.